I got this sixth sense that this interview is going to be fun, it's going to be entertaining, and it is going to be introspective. And of course, most importantly, inspiring. Troy Clardy is with us. He is on Twitter at Troy Clardy, and he is with Pac-12 Network, ESPN. And he also works, of course, with Stanford, went to Stanford, and does the podcast, The Tree Cast, which is really interesting because he has on a lot of athletes with the Cardinal and is able to really dive in to his interest in the conference, of course, and of course, where he went to school. I'm Bryan Fenley, national anchor at Fox Sports Radio. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. Also worked a little bit with UCLA on their radio side of things. And we're going to look at Troy's career. And this is going to be a lot of fun. Troy, I want to start here as I welcome you in.
Thank you. Appreciate the time. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for making the time. I have watched the way your career, and there's nothing, and never to say, Troy, that there's one way to make it in this business, but you've had such an interesting backstory as to where you've gotten to today, where nothing about it is something that we see ordinary, where you've got the background in radio, you've got the background as an executive producer, as a radio host, and now you're working in television a lot. And over the course of your career, when do you feel like, Troy, you've had to work hardest to advocate for yourself?
Pretty much every step of the way. And, it's, you can do so many great things, but if you're not being your biggest promoter, and it's something I've had to learn throughout the course of my career. And it's something I've been guilty of not maybe perhaps being my own biggest cheerleader at times, then it's certainly a lot harder to get the word out about what you're capable of and what you can do. And look, it's hard to succeed in this business and to survive in this business, no matter who you are. But, when you have the chance to be able to put together the body of work, and if you've done something that you're proud of, hey, you know what? Let the whole world know about it, right? Not too many folks can say that they actually booked NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell on the radio show that they were producing. I can actually say I've done that. And it was actually one of the bigger highlights of my career when I was back at the ESPN radio network in lovely Bristol, Connecticut for 4 years. So, there are so many things that you can do, but, there's also that facet of, hey, there's a lot that I can do. There's a lot of things that I can bring to the table. A lot of folks need to know about it. And, I'm guilty of kind of being up and down a little bit along the way in that respect, but pretty much, every single day it's a grind. This, right? I mean, it's a grind as far as making sure that people know, hey, I'm out here, we're doing great things here. I'm excited to have you on board too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You got to be visible, and you've got to use your social media platforms, because being out there and being seen is half the battle, because people need to see what you're doing. And then when they're making decisions on what they're going to do with talent, they have you in the back of their mind because they're following you and what you're doing, and you're staying active on social media. Troy Clardy is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. And so in a way, you got to get away from, and people in general, that stigma of look at me, because this is part of the business. You've got to represent yourself and get your name out there. And I find it interesting, Troy, because I don't think in the big picture here, for you, your mission, your goal is more than look at me, but by focusing on yourself, what do you hope that your role does in terms of being better for the greater good and using your story to inspire others in a way that others can't?
Well, look, I in a lot of ways, as a play-by-play announcer, I don't look the part, right? I don't look like a lot of the decision makers out there who make the decisions on placing people in certain roles. I don't sound the part in some respects. I think a little differently. I have a little different perspective on things. I didn't go to Syracuse, right?
Yes.
Let's just call that what it is, right? Yeah. I didn't have a father, who was in the business already, who could point the way. I didn't have a brother already in the business who could point the way. My dad's an air traffic controller, right? He loves sports, but he wasn't in the business to kind of help us speed things along a little bit, maybe open some doors and do those sorts of things. So there are a lot of reasons in a lot of respects why I probably shouldn't be still in this business and maybe have some of the successes that I've had in this business. But lo and behold, here I am, graduated from Stanford in 97. And from there, I've been in this business every single day, 17 years in sports talk radio, major market and network level. And being with the Pac-12 Network, this is my 8th season, my 8th year of doing a TV play-by-play for them after pivoting from the radio side to the TV side. So, even though, you may not exactly fit in certain boxes that many play-by-play announcers seem to fit into, that still doesn't mean that you can't be you. That still doesn't mean that you can't bring the unique things that you have to the table and make things sound a little different, make things look a little different, and make the and kind of broaden the scope of what your role is as a play-by-play announcer. So, if folks, want to use that as an inspiring point, and you look at my story, okay, that's great. I appreciate it. I'm certainly appreciative of that. But there are a lot of reasons why I probably shouldn't be, still here in this business, but here I am. They haven't run me out yet.
No, and no time soon, because you're doing great work. Troy Clardy is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. So I saw this tweet recently, Troy, from you, and I wanted to bring this up, where you were talking about and looking at the Heisman winner. And when the winner makes the speech, and here they go in front of everybody, and they say who they're thankful of and all the hard work, and thank you to this person and thank you to that person. And you said, and I love this about you, you said this award, you thought, should be dedicated, if you are that person winning the Heisman, you should go up to the podium and say, this award is dedicated to all the teachers that told me I'd never amount to anything, close quote. Those people in your past who told you you wouldn't be able to do this, how often do you think about that as motivation today?
Well, and that tweet was Notorious B.I.G. reference. Just once. I want just someone to go up to the podium. This award's dedicated to the people who tell me I'd never amount to nothing. And all that stuff. And part of that. Look, there are a lot of reasons why I enjoy doing what I do and why I like to do what I do. I legitimately enjoy it. I legitimately enjoy the grind. I enjoy the prep, talking to the coaches and the players. And there's nothing like going to the stadium, putting on a headset and calling a game. There is absolutely nothing like it. And I do it for me because I enjoy it. I do it for me and my wife because, hey, I need to make my contributions so that Troy and Kelly need to pay off their mortgage fund. That's a pretty important deal. And I also do it for the people who have believed in me along the way, who believed in the fact that, hey, Troy can do this role. Let's put him in here and see what he can do. And knowing that, they're going to get a professional broadcast. I'm going to show up to the stadium prepped, right from jump. And I'm also going to have fun, right? And I hope all those things come across throughout the course of every broadcast. Now, all of that being said, it would be a lie if I said that a small part of me also didn't exactly think about, hey, I'm still here, yet, you didn't believe in me. Yeah. You fired me for no reason. You held me back. You did this, you did that. There is a little bit of that in there somewhere, right? It's human nature. It's not what drives me to succeed. It's not, the big reason, the big sticking point for why I do what I do. It's not like Michael Jordan stepping up to the podium and, shouting out his JV coach and saying, hey, you cut me, there was a bit of a mean streak in that speech, but I also think it spoke to some kind of base, kind of impulse that I think everyone generally has on some level. Some folks are better at repressing it than others. And I, as the cool kids say, or maybe they're not the cool, maybe it's not something the cool kids say anymore. I'm not cool. I don't know. People don't ask me what the cool things are, but proving your haters wrong, right? There is a little bit of that in there somewhere. Some people fuels more people more than others. There's a little bit of fuel in that for me, not a whole lot, but a little. And it's kind of nice to to be able to say, hey, no matter what happened to this, no matter what happened at this job, no matter what happened at this stop, no matter what this person tried to do to me, I'm still here. I'm still standing, and things are looking pretty well.
Oh, they certainly are, and I'm looking forward to seeing what your future holds. Troy Clardy is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. Yeah, there's that interesting point where it's like, and I'm with you. You look at it, you never forget some of those who doubted you, and but you don't want it to get toxic. So it's like, how do I use that as fuel, but without making it all encompassing and
Right.
take you over? And I think that you found a beautiful harmony in that. And some of the hardest times, as you know, Troy, is early on in this business, and people will talk you out of it. They'll tell you, the percentages, blah, blah, blah. And I that is a pet peeve to me. I hate, Troy, when people say, do you realize how many, you know what? People, if you want it bad enough, you're going to find a way. You have found a way. So I don't like when people get really negative about that stuff. But when you are starting out and you were believing in yourself, and sure, like we talked about, there might have been naysayers. What sort of mental state did you have to get into to sort of push those aside and say, look, I don't care what you're saying. This is the goal. This is the vision. This is the dream of mine. And I'm going to see it through.
Well, I think that number one, it helps when you know what you do, right? And when you realize, hey, this is what I do. I mean, there are members of my family who said, Troy, boy, I wish you'd gone to medical school. you know, and that's great and all, and I understand that to some extent, but no, that never interested me. Computers interested me as a kid, but I can't imagine myself right now sitting in some dark room coding for 19 hours a day. I couldn't imagine doing that right now. So it helps when you start with that base, that foundation of, hey, this is what I do, right? This is what my talents and this is what my skill sets are leading me towards. And getting some early opportunities, early on, graduating from Stanford and latching on a couple months later with the radio station in San Francisco that ended up becoming the flagship station of Stanford athletics, and hosting and producing Stanford men's basketball radio pregame shows. The first year was the year they went to the Final Four, and this was back when the Cardinals were at their peak. Man, Maples Pavilion was the place to be. Casey Jacobson, Ryan Mendez, the tail end of Brevin Knight's career, Arthur Lee, Mark Madsen, those dudes. Maples Pavilion was just out of sight. And especially when UCLA came to town, oh man, that was one of the more off the hook sporting events legitimately in the Bay Area and on the Bay Area sporting calendar. So getting those opportunities and not being run off the air, not having anyone say, oh my God, Clardy, oh no, get this dude off the air, right? Pull the plug, pull the cord right now. Let's go to national programming or something like that. But having those early opportunities and being a part of following that team, being a part of following Stanford football during that time, they ended up going to the Rose Bowl at the end of the '99 season and being a part of following that ride as well. Those two things, just the basic foundation of just knowing, hey, this is what you want to do. This is what I want to do. This is what I truly believe in. And B, getting the opportunities and making the most of those opportunities. I think those kind of help propel things, especially in the early going.
It's interesting because while I do some work at UCLA, I actually went to college at UNC Greensboro. And if I get my history correct, Troy, Stanford basketball in an early round, obviously first round, Stanford, I think, played UNC Greensboro. I could be wrong, 2001, 2002, whatever. And obviously the Cardinal, wiped them off the court. But I wonder if that was right around the time that you were there, or right when that basketball was at its high note for the Cardinal. And so there's that interesting connection. But if you think about your development as a broadcaster from those early days to now, when you look back at those early days and maybe you find yourself having some free time and you watch some of your old tape or you listen to some of your old audio, what's it like in your reaction to that?
Uh, you know, going back, and this even applies to TV stuff, just 5, 6, 7 years ago or whatever. And I go back sometimes and I'll watch it or go back and listen to it and go, boy, yeesh, yuck. What was I thinking? I was the radio play-by-play voice of the Pittsburgh Power in the old Arena Football League for their inaugural season. And my arena football play-by-play style was a bit more high octane, right? And the volume was turned up a little bit because, heck, that was a high octane sport. The product itself was louder, it was more in your face and things like that. So I kind of punched some things up a little bit from that standpoint whenever I was calling an arena football game as opposed to a regular outdoor football game. And listening back to some things, it's like, God, do you really have to scream your way through that? Really? Seriously? No. There are ways to raise your voice to properly convey the emotion of the moment or whatever, the drama of the moment or what's happening. But there were just times where I just out and out screamed, and it's just like, oh, really? You kind of cringe at that. It's the same thing similarly on the TV side, especially, when I go back to sports, I had to learn to call more or less on the fly. It was like one time, I got an email from the Pac-12 Network. Hey, Troy, what are you doing next weekend? You know anything about lacrosse? And I was like, I'm open next weekend, and I'll know a heck of a lot more about it in 10 days now.
Yeah.
So going back and kind of, watching that first, those first broadcasts when you're first calling a sport that's not unique to you, and you're still trying to figure out some things. You're not exactly 100% up on strategy. Heck, you're just trying to still get a grasp on the rule book. So you kind of maybe back some things off a little bit because you're not necessarily used to seeing the game from that standpoint. But going from there to maybe a couple years later, where you have a bit more experience under your belt, where you know more of what to watch, how the game flows, what actually is transpiring, on the field at any given time, and you can actually see the game and see things unfold before you, at a much easier rate. Instead of having to think, you're actually seeing, and those thoughts are actually going to your mouth. And oh, by the way, 2 or 3 people are talking in your head at any given time, generally. Just getting more comfortable in those things and realizing a bit more, of what each individual sport is like. It is kind of neat to see progress in that respect, and going, oh wow, boy, I'm not screaming anymore. There are a lot more things that I'm able to recognize at this point and go, oh hey, that is something strategic. That's happening here. So it is kind of, sometimes you kind of cringe, when you go back in the vault. But when you compare it to, or at least hopefully you improve, right? Sometimes that's not always the case. But sometimes when you compare from those cringeworthy moments to up to now, and you go, okay, all right, that's getting better. That's getting better. So it's kind of nice to be able to compare benchmarks and to go back and say, wow, things are better now than they were a few years ago.
Yeah, no question. It has to come with a lot of pride, but also that feeling that you can always get better. That's sort of always the vision. And you're not alone when thinking about screaming. I remember, Troy, when I was first doing local TV in Spokane, Washington, and I was reading off highlights, and there was a Gonzaga play. And you learn over time when to hit the high notes, right? But when I'm first starting out, and I'm sure a lot of people would understand and be sympathetic to this, you're so excited that you don't know when to hit the high note in a highlight, and every note's the high note. And that just comes with experience. But so I'm with you. And I was called, I was like, Bryan, stop doing this. So I totally understand with you as far as that.
Well, and plus for TV, and this is one of the things I love about doing TV, you can shut up, right?
Yes.
You can be quiet. You can let the picture, you can let the audio tell the story. You don't have to do all of the talking all of the time. So just knowing when to speak, what volume to use, tone, context, all those sorts of things go into it as well.
Yeah. And like you pointed out, sort of like an athlete, and the more they watch game film, the more the game slows down for him or her. And that's the same for a broadcaster, especially when you're doing new sports and you're trying these new things and learning how everything works. The game slows down for you. And then, like you said, you pick up on things that you might not have when you first watched it, as far as different strategies or certain things that happen really fast by the natural eye. And it's really clear, Troy, that you're getting all of that, and it's really neat to see your progression and rise, which leads me into my next question. What does your wife think about what you've done and the progress that's unfolding in front of you?
She's thrilled. She's thrilled, and I'm super grateful for her and just the rock, that she's been, especially and particularly over the last couple of years. I mean, look, this pandemic hasn't been easy on anyone, right? And the shutdown with sports. Last year was tough. I mean, thank goodness I had the podcast to kind of, at least keep me somewhat sharp with the tree cast and being able to stay on top of things with Stanford, get great guests like Senator Cory Booker, David Shaw's jumped on for a few exclusive chats, Tara Vanderveer, Mark Madsen, Brevin Knight, and be able to kind of maintain and kind of stay sharp with that. But she knew the deal pretty much. This wasn't anything that was foreign to her. This wasn't anything. We were friends before we started dating, and before we eventually became married. So this wasn't anything that was new to her. She knew that sports was a passion of mine, and that play-by-play was a passion of mine as well. And it kind of it goes back, and I'm super grateful for one of my big influences. Summer after my sophomore year in college, I interned at KOA, the big news radio station in Denver, the flagship station for the Denver Broncos and the Colorado Rockies. And the sports director at the time was Larry Zimmer, who was the voice of the Broncos at that time, and also the longtime voice of the Colorado Buffaloes. And one of the last things I did before coming back to the Bay Area to start my junior year of college, he sat me down in his office and just watching him and how he approached his job was just eye-opening, and it was amazing. And there were two things he said to me that have stuck with me. One was that, "Hey, Troy, we think I think you can do this. I think you can have real success in this business." But the other thing was that, "Hey, you have to make sure that the people around you are on your team, because this is not an easy business. It requires moving," which I've done a few times. "It requires working nights and weekends and holidays." I think sometimes my wife might get a little frustrated sometimes when she's like, "Hey, we should plan a trip for April or May." And I'm like, well, I'd love to, but I just don't know how things are looking. It's important to have the people who are closest to you understand what the demands of this business are. And Larry Zimmer taught me that way back in the day, and I'm super grateful for that lesson. And I am 139% grateful that my wife realizes that as well. She's been a rock. She's been a superstar, and I can't thank her enough for putting up with me, number one, but especially the last couple of years when things haven't been completely flying high and everything like that. So yeah, she's been awesome.
I think that people understate in having successful broadcasting careers how important it has, like for you, Troy, to have that special someone. Because when there are lulls, when times aren't going the way you want, not only having her understand the hours and the grind and missing holidays and then maybe celebrating Christmas before or after or whenever, but also to tell you, "I believe in you. You're going to get out of this and you're going to succeed. Like, things are going to get better for you and open up for you," as far as not just understanding, but I feel like as a cheerleader as well. And I can't understate just how much that helps as far as getting people going and getting them out of tough times. Because as you said, Troy, there are moments in people's careers where it's like, it's tough. And when you think about some of those moments in your career where you were presented with a challenge, and it was a time where having a cheerleader would have been best for you, when were those moments for you when you look and you span over the course of your career?
Well, and I'll go back to pretty much the turning point of my entire career to this point. After going to Pittsburgh and working there for 4 years, executive producer, CBS Radio at the time, launching Sports Radio 93.7, The Fan, and coming off of my experience in Bristol, in Connecticut, and learning how sports radio is actually crafted, and then taking those things to Pittsburgh, where, look, Pittsburgh is one of the top sports markets as far as sports fan passions and all those sorts of things in the country. Hey, Steelers lose on Sunday, there is a palpable pall over that city, and it doesn't lift until maybe Wednesday or Thursday, sometimes, if you're lucky. So being in Pittsburgh really taught me a lot about being local and how important it is to be, and how important sports can be to the community. But after that, got the opportunity that I've been working for. You know, when I left the Bay Area the first time to go to Bristol, the goal was to come back to the Bay Area and get my own sports talk radio show. And that happened. After Pittsburgh, came back to the Bay Area and latched on, became the evening host, and became the primary radio host for the radio pregame and postgame host for the Oakland A's as well. Working with the A's was fantastic. It was, they were super supportive, super encouraging, super professional, and it, working for the baseball team that I've loved since I was a kid, you know, going back to the Bash Brothers and Stu and Eck and all those guys. Man, that was a dream come true. Working for the A's was fantastic. I wish I could have said the same about working for the radio station itself. And those were the folks who actually signed my paychecks. Wasn't the most professional environment. My boss, who, you know, I overlapped briefly with at ESPN Radio, but he left to latch on to become a program director at another station, then became the program director in San Francisco, and eventually hired me. Had a reputation for, you know, being a great talent coach. I didn't get any of that. Was told, hey, don't worry about doing anything big for your evening show. We'll worry about that after the season. I'm like, okay. And I went ahead and did those things I was thinking of doing anyway. So 8 months pass, and I'm starting to see some things that aren't quite jibing. And, you know, especially when someone gets hired as a host and they don't immediately go on the air, and they just get like 2 or 3 months to just kind of sit around a little bit and just kind of soak everything in. Well, I would have loved that. I signed my contract March 5th, hit the road to Pittsburgh on the 18th, got to the Bay Area on the 21st, first day in the office on the 24th, first day in the year on the 27th, juggling all those things. And it was a bit of a struggle that first month, you know, to keep everything, you know, in perspective. So 8 months after that, I get brought in and I get fired. And it wasn't for ratings. Those had never been higher in that time slot. It certainly wasn't for content. It certainly wasn't for, you know, the reasons that normally you should get fired for in that business. And actually what those reasons were, I still don't know. I got the whole, you know, we're going in a different direction thing. Okay. All right, great. But that whole experience, as unfortunate as it was, it taught me, you know, sometimes you have to learn some lessons the hard way. And it taught me, don't sign a bad contract. I took a pay cut to go from Pittsburgh to the Bay Area. It should be the other way around, you know, not the other way, but don't sign a bad contract. Even if it's someone who you think is a friend who's offering it to you. And maybe on another line, if someone's offering you a bad contract and they call themselves your friend, they're probably not your friend. And at that radio station, there had been a lot of turnover in the host role. And it was also, I also learned that, you know, hey, take that into account whenever you're going someplace new. How quickly do they turn folks over? And it's kind of like, you know, you're walking down the street and you get to a spot, and then you look down on the ground and there's a bunch of bird poop on the ground, right? You know, you don't want to stand there, right? Yeah. Because at some point you're going to get hit. Similar thing kind of perhaps here. You know, you don't want to stand in the spot where folks get hit, right? So you learn that lesson the hard way. And I also, fortunately at that time, I was thinking of walking into the Pac-12 Network anyway, walking into that door anyway, at some point, and supplementing that with that experience. And always have your next move out there somewhere and a plan to get it in motion. And certainly that event kind of sped up me walking into the Pac-12 Network a little bit, and got the meeting with the head of talent at that time. And, I'm sitting here thinking it's just a meet and greet and all those sorts of things. Hey, how you doing? Well, okay, well, we'll let you know if anything crops up. She shuts the door, and the first thing she says to me is, "You're exactly what we're looking for." I'm like, "Oh, what? Huh? Oh, wow. Okay. I gotta, I gotta change around my entire approach."
Wow.
So from that, latching on with the Pac-12 network, pivoting from the radio side to the TV side, and going from the second toughest day of my life. Won't go into my first here in this form, but the second toughest day of my life was when I got fired for no reason, and having to go to my wife and say, "Hey, we might have to start over completely again." Not an easy conversation to have.
Wow.
To go from that to latching on a couple months later with the Pac-12 network, who've been fantastic to work with, and finally being able to do what I've always really, 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 really wanted to do. Those early Pac-12, as far as, meeting a cheerleader, when you're at your most challenged, couldn't have come around at a better time. Ted Robinson, the great broadcaster, certainly helped make that happen. And I know we started this chat with about how it's important to be your own biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
But that being said, you still can't do it alone, right? So, with Ted helping to lead the way there, and with the Pac-12 network, I'm super grateful to each of those respective entities for being my biggest cheerleaders and being my biggest believers when man, I really needed it.
Well, Troy, and I'll leave you with this, because they led the way for you, but now you are leading the way for so many others. And so it's very neat to see how those paid it forward for you. You were able to rebound after a tough time, and now you're thriving in a beautiful way. And now others look at you for inspiration, and how the effect that others had on you, now you're having on others yourself. And I just think that it's a beautiful story, and one in which, like you said, would not have come without the help of others, but you certainly have the talent as well. And you've got great cheerleaders, your wife. I'm a cheerleader. I'm on your team, a lot of others as well. And I'm excited to see what's next for you and all that you do with, obviously, Pac-12, Stanford, ESPN, the list goes on, your podcast, TreeCast. Encourage everybody to go check it out, download it wherever you get your podcasts. And like you said, there's some great conversations that you had with some high profile people. Troy, I've had so much fun. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you. I certainly appreciate a lot of things about you yourself. We're talking cheerleaders, right? Send me some pom poms and megaphone, man, because big fan of your approach to content. Especially with this hot take world that we're living in. Your approach to content and the volume of your content as well. Man, you're churning stuff out at a very, very impressive clip. And the folks you've been able to chat with here on this show, I am beyond honored to join this distinguished list, this distinguished guest list that you've had. And I certainly appreciate the time. This was fun.
Well, Troy, you are distinguished, and of course you're going to come on, and I look forward to meeting you in person down the road here. Troy Clardy, I'm Bryan Fenley. Troy, thanks again, man. Really enjoyed the conversation.
You got it. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay sane.